Today we're going to be looking at word problems involving multiplication of fractions. And multiplication of fractions can be a little bit tricky sometimes because it sounds like division because you could also do it by dividing, which would be a little bit more complicated, but it's easier to do it by multiplying. So this is where it gets a little tricky. So let's take a look at this problem and a look at the language that lets us know that we're going to be multiplying fractions. The Garcia family volunteers at the Chestnut Street Community Gardens. 1/2 of the garden is used for growing vegetables. 2/3 of the vegetable section is used for growing squash. What fraction of the garden is used for growing squash? First of all, let's code our problem. Remember that we want to underline the question. So the question is asking what fraction of the garden is used for growing squash. Okay, then we gotta find the information we need. So 2/3 of the vegetable set. What do I know about squash? 2/3 of the vegetable section is used for squash. Okay, so what do I know about the vegetable section? 1/2 of the garden is used for growing vegetables. Okay, so here's the information I'm going to need in order to do this problem. Okay, so and here's where the multiplication comes in. So 1/2 of the garden. So if I wanted to find what 1/2 of the garden is, I would take the garden and literally cut it in half, which would be dividing. But I could also multiply 1/2 by 1, which would get me 1/2. I would need 2/3 of the vegetable section is used for growing squash. So this is the word here, of the, 2/3 of. So if you're looking to find a fraction of a number, that's going to be your clue that you're going to be multiplying. So I'm looking for 2/3 of the vegetable section. The vegetable section is 1/2 of the garden. So what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to find 2/3 of 1/2. Okay? So that's how I'm going to figure out how much of the garden is used for squash. All right? So 2/3 of the vegetable section is used for squash and 1/2 of the garden is used for vegetables. So I'm looking for 2/3 of a half. So think of the word of as a multiplication sign. So when you're trying to find a fraction of a number, you're going to multiply. So 2/3 of 1/2 when you multiply, 2 times 1 equals 2. 3 times 2 equals 6. You have 2 6. Then you're going to have to put 2 6 into simplest form, and I know that it's not in simplest form because they're both even. So I know that 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 2 6 is also 1/3 of that garden. Okay, let's take a look at another one here. Kylie and her mom need blue fabric. Each yard of blue fabric costs $4. If they buy 4.5 yards of red fabric, how much will it cost? Okay, so it's a little bit different, but not really because 4.5 yards of red fabric. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this problem apart just like we did the other ones. So we want to know how much will it cost. Okay, so we have 4.5 yards of red fabric. What do we know about the fabric? We know that the fabric costs $4. Okay, so we're going to have to find 4.5 yards and we're going to be multiplying it by $4. So this one is kind of almost like what you would think of a regular multiplication problem. So if I had 4 yards of fabric, I would multiply it by $4 to figure out how much it would cost. So if I have 4.5 yards of fabric, that doesn't change anything. I still have to multiply each yard that I am buying by the cost for 1 yard. So I'm going to have $4 4.5 times. Okay? So I'm going to have to multiply 4.5 times 4. Now what we remember about fractions is in order to multiply, both numbers need to be fractions. So this 4.5 here needs to be turned into a it needs to be turned into an improper fraction. And this 4 needs to be turned into a fraction. When both numbers are fractions, we can multiply. Turn a mixed number into a fraction, we use what's called what I call the fraction wheel. Multiply the denominator times the whole number, so 2 times 4. Add this extra numerator up here. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, which you'll see down here. And then our denominator stays the same, so we have 9 halves. To turn a whole number into a fraction, all you do is put a 1 underneath it. So you have 9/2 times 4 over 1, or 4 ones. So you just, again, multiply across your numerators and multiply across your denominators to get your answer. Now, because you're multiplying by a number that's bigger than 1, okay, and a number 1 and a number that's bigger than 1, your answer is going to be bigger than 1, so it's going to be an improper fraction. So what's going to happen is when you get that answer, you're going to have to turn it back into a mixed number. So you can have 9 times 4, which is 36, and then you have 2 times 1, which is 2, which is 36 halves. So how many halves can you make out of 36? You're going to have to turn that back into a mixed number by doing the top, the 36 divided by the bottom. Okay, let's see what we got going on here. Half of the neighborhood volunteers at the community center. We've got a lot of nice volunteers in our neighborhood. 2/5 of the volunteers are under the age of 20. How many of the volunteers are under the age of 20? So here's my question. How many of the volunteers are under the age of 20? What do I know about the people under the age of 20? I know that 2/5 of them are under the age of 20. So I have to ask myself, 2/5 of what? 2/5 of a half of the total volunteers. So again, I'm finding a fraction of a number. So in order to solve this, I'm going to find 2/5 of, okay, multiplication, 1/2. And so I'm going to multiply those so that I can figure out the fraction of volunteers who are under the age of 20. Here is our last problem for the day, or last problem for this video at least. Kelly ran 2 3/4 miles during practice on Monday. She ran 1.5 times that amount on Tuesday. How far did she run on Tuesday? Okay, so I would like you to go ahead and pause the video right here and find the answer to this problem and be ready to bring the answer to this problem to your teacher center today.